In a world where silence often feels safer than truth and where politics has become more performance than principle, sometimes a single moment shatters the illusion. Sometimes a few unexpected words spoken at the most unexpected place and time can awaken people. That's exactly what happened when Donald Trump, former president of the United States, known for his unapologetic boldness, said something at a Ramadan Iftar gathering that no one saw coming. Something that left a room full of people in shock and left the world scrambling to make sense of it. It wasn't a tweet, it wasn't a press conference, it wasn't a campaign rally. It was a moment meant to be peaceful, spiritual, a gathering where Muslims broke their fast, reflected on their faith, and remembered the values of compassion, humility, and truth. But amidst the food and the prayers, Trump said something that pulled the veil back on a global narrative too many have been too afraid to question. The relationship between the West, especially the US, and Israel. For decades, the media has painted a one-sided picture. Palestinians labeled as aggressors, Israel seen as the eternal victim. But this time, it wasn't a Palestinian or Muslim activist who stood up and challenged the story. It wasn't a sheikh or a political dissenter. It was a man who once moved the US embassy to Jerusalem, a man who was praised by the Israeli government for years, a man who now, whether by intent or impulse, let the world hear a truth that's been whispered for too long. This moment wasn't about Trump as a politician. This was about the walls of silence cracking. It was about a world leader, flawed, controversial, and unpredictable, saying something out loud that others only say behind closed doors. He mentioned injustice. He mentioned oppression. He questioned the blind support, the double standards, and the imbalance of power. He questioned what's happening to the Palestinian people at an Iftar, a holy moment for Muslims, during the holiest month of the Islamic calendar. And when he did, it wasn't just a soundbite, it was a symbol. A moment where truth peeked through the fog. A moment where people, especially Muslims, leaned in. Because this wasn't about left or right politics or about supporting Trump. This was about the fact that someone with a global microphone finally dared to point at the elephant in the room. As Muslims, we've seen generations of pain. We've seen our brothers and sisters in Gaza and the West Bank suffer in silence. We've watched news channels show broken buildings, but never the broken lives. We've heard leaders speak of peace while funding destruction. But for once, someone from the very system that supported this imbalance just asked the world to take another look. And that should matter. Not because of who said it, but because it was said at all. This is bigger than politics. This is about justice. It's about recognizing that truth has no party, no passport, no political agenda. It's about waking up to the idea that even those you may not align with ideologically can sometimes stumble upon a truth that demands attention. And when that truth is spoken during a sacred Islamic moment at an iftar, it hits deeper because it shows that even in places of power, even in circles where silence is bought and sold, truth can still break through. This video isn't about glorifying any leader. It's about the message, the moment, and the meaning behind it. It's about the ripple effect of that moment and what it says about the times we live in. It's about showing Muslims that the world is listening in strange ways through strange voices, and we must be alert, united, and wise. The truth is surfacing piece by piece, and it's our job to hold on to it, to share it, and to keep it alive. Because when truth is spoken, no matter by whom, it's the believers who know how to recognize it. The setting was serene, the atmosphere filled with a spirit of peace and reflection. It was an iftar event during the holy month of Ramadan, where Muslims gathered to break their fast in unity and faith. No one expected controversy. No one anticipated that a political bombshell would be dropped during such a sacred moment. But then, in a moment that froze the room, Donald Trump spoke. His words weren't vague or diplomatic. They were direct, unfiltered, and laced with truths that many in positions of power avoid saying out loud. He spoke about Israel, specifically its treatment of Palestinians, and questioned the one-sided support the U.S. government has consistently shown. Coming from a man who was once hailed as one of Israel's strongest allies, it was a statement that sent shockwaves not only through the Muslim community, but through global media and political circles. The attendees were visibly stunned. Some leaned in, others exchanged glances. Was this really happening? A former U.S. president speaking against the narrative that has dominated Western politics for decades? He referenced the suffering in Gaza. He acknowledged the oppression. He challenged the selective outrage and media silence. And he did all of this, not at a protest, not at a debate, but at an Iftar dinner, a moment meant to reflect the peace of Islam. The irony was powerful, the timing even more so. Muslims watching this unfold felt a strange mix of shock, validation, and hope, because for once, someone who had once helped push the status quo had now become a vessel, perhaps unknowingly, for a message that desperately needed to be heard. The truth, no matter how uncomfortable, had made its way to the surface, and the world was now listening in a way it hadn't before. What made Trump's statement even more impactful wasn't just what he said, it was who was listening. For years, Muslim communities in the West have felt unheard, misunderstood, and misrepresented. Whether it's the constant portrayal in mainstream media, the double standards in foreign policy, or the silence in the face of injustice, there's been a sense of isolation and frustration. But at that iftar, as Trump addressed the crowd with remarks that veered sharply from the usual political script, people weren't just shocked, they were seen. And that changed everything. In that room, the words didn't just echo, they pierced. It wasn't just a political speech, it was a moment of unexpected acknowledgement. For once, the narrative shifted. People who had long been dismissed as conspiracy theorists for questioning the treatment of Palestinians now saw a former president, one known for his bluntness and conservative base, say the very things they've been screaming for years. That kind of validation, especially in a political environment that often turns a blind eye, is powerful. It reminded Muslims that their concerns are not invisible, that their cries for justice are not in vain, and that even in the most unlikely spaces, the truth has a way of slipping through. This moment went viral not because it was controversial, but because it hit a nerve, deep and raw. Muslims across the globe felt like the walls of silence were cracking, that something was shifting in public consciousness. Even critics had to pause and reevaluate their assumptions. It wasn't about supporting Trump or agreeing with his policies. It was about the fact that truth, when spoken, carries a power no media spin can contain. And when that truth is spoken in the presence of those who have carried its weight in silence, it becomes unforgettable. The media reaction to Trump's comments was as predictable as it was revealing. Within hours, headlines began to spin, clips were trimmed, and narratives were redirected. Some tried to downplay what he said, others tried to reframe it as a misunderstanding or political ploy. But those who watched the moment in real time knew better. The rawness of his words, the setting in which they were spoken, and the faces of those who heard them told a story that no edit could erase. The media, long criticized for selective reporting, especially on issues surrounding Palestine and Islam, was now caught off guard. For years, the mainstream narrative has been carefully crafted, painting Muslims in a certain light and reducing complex geopolitical issues to simple, biased slogans. But this time, something cracked through that facade. The Muslim community saw firsthand how uncomfortable the truth made the gatekeepers of public discourse. They watched how quickly the event was buried under other headlines, how few outlets actually shared the full video, and how some tried to reframe the entire conversation. But instead of discouragement, this sparked something else, a hunger to take control of their own narrative. Platforms like TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram lit up with Muslims sharing the clip, translating it, analyzing it, and holding the media accountable. They weren't waiting for validation anymore, they were becoming the storytellers. In that moment, Trump unintentionally did something massive. He exposed not just the silence around Palestinian suffering, but also the machinery that keeps that silence in place. And as Muslims began to share the truth louder than ever, a shift began, not just in how stories were told, but in who was telling them. This wasn't just a political moment, it became a media awakening driven by faith, truth, and unshakable resilience. What made this moment even more profound was the location. New York City, a place known for its diversity, culture, and political complexity. Hosting an Iftar event in the heart of such a city and hearing these words spoken gave the statement a gravity that couldn't be ignored. In a city that has seen countless protests, movements, and vigils in support of Palestine and in defense of Muslim communities, this event stood out. It wasn't just another political gathering, it felt like a turning point. New York has always been a symbol of resilience and resistance, and now it became the stage where long-silenced truths were finally voiced in an unexpected setting. The Muslim attendees, many of whom were leaders, scholars, activists, and ordinary citizens, felt something shift in the atmosphere. People left that event not just talking about what was said, but reflecting deeply on the timing, the courage, and the symbolism behind it. The energy rippled through mosques, Islamic centers, community groups, and social media platforms. People who had grown used to disappointment from politicians felt a strange mix of validation and renewed determination. It was as if the truth had slipped through the cracks of the usual political walls and touched the hearts of people far beyond that banquet hall. The location made it impossible to ignore, and the buzz that followed proved just how deeply the words resonated. NYC became more than just a host, it became a beacon. A city that has long represented freedom and opportunity now became a place where a powerful truth was spoken on behalf of a voiceless people. And that impact continues to echo in conversations, reflections, and renewed activism, reminding us that sometimes the most powerful moments of truth happen in the most unexpected places. What followed Trump's statement was something that no one could have scripted. A wave of emotional responses from Muslims around the world. For many, it wasn't about who said it, but what was finally said. People had spent years watching the suffering in Palestine, seeing it dismissed, silenced, or politicized. And now, someone with global influence had finally voiced what so many had been praying for others to recognize. The tears, the prayers, the expressions of hope, they all poured out across social media in the form of heartfelt videos, personal reflections, and powerful du'as. People who had never spoken publicly about their pain began to share their stories. Mothers cried for the children in Gaza. Youth recorded themselves overwhelmed with emotion. Converts to Islam expressed how moments like these were part of what opened their hearts to the faith. It wasn't just a political shift, it was a spiritual one. Muslims around the world were reminded that truth has a way of emerging even when it seems buried. That Allah's plan is always greater. That even through the mouth of someone unexpected, justice can be declared and hearts can be stirred. In mosques, imams mentioned the event in khutbahs, tying it to prophetic teachings about standing with the oppressed. In homes, families discussed the meaning of justice, truth, and the importance of supporting Palestine. What was once seen as a distant issue became deeply personal again, reigniting the sense of unity and compassion the Ummah is known for. The emotional impact wasn't just temporary, it lit a flame in people's hearts. A flame that reminded them of the power of dua, of unity, of never giving up on the oppressed. And most of all, it reminded them that Allah can use any means to awaken the world to a truth that cannot be denied. As the message spread across borders and languages, one thing became undeniably clear. This moment sparked a global awakening. From the streets of London to the corners of Kuala Lumpur, Muslims and even non-Muslims began to re-examine the narrative they had been fed for so long. People who had stayed silent out of fear or uncertainty now found their voices. Activists felt a surge of support they hadn't felt in years. Communities that once felt isolated suddenly realized they weren't alone in their beliefs, in their grief, or in their desire for justice. There was a shift in public consciousness that no media filter could suppress. Social media became a vessel for truth, carrying clips of the statement, reflections, and calls to action to millions within hours. Suddenly, the words of oppressed Palestinians, the cries of children behind walls, and the prayers of the faithful were amplified, not ignored. It wasn't just a political ripple. It was a heart-to-heart connection, stretching across oceans. Teachers brought up the topic in classrooms. Students discussed it in dorm rooms and cafeterias. It entered workplaces, homes, and hearts. This wasn't about one speech anymore. It became a mirror for the world to see what had been hidden. And through it, many began to understand that supporting justice isn't a religious stance, it's a human one. More people turned to the Quran out of curiosity, trying to understand why Muslims speak so passionately about Palestine. What they found wasn't hate or division, but a message of peace, mercy, and unwavering commitment to justice. And that perhaps was the greatest shift of all. Hearts that once held doubt or fear were now reaching for understanding, discovering truth not just through words, but through the undeniable spirit that Islam carries when it stands beside the oppressed. My brothers and sisters, this moment wasn't just a political moment, it was a spiritual reminder. A reminder that Allah is al-Haq, the absolute truth, and no matter how many lies are told, no matter how many years of silence and distortion exist, the truth always finds its way to the surface. What was said that night pierced through the noise, through the propaganda, through the fear. It spoke to the hearts of millions who have been waiting, crying, and praying for the world to finally open its eyes. For years, the Palestinian people have been dehumanized, mislabeled, and forgotten by many. But this moment cracked the wall of ignorance. It opened a door, one that many had tried to keep closed. And behind that door is the reality that Islam has always stood for justice, that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, always stood with the oppressed, and that our ummah, no matter how scattered, still beats with the same heart. To every Muslim who felt hope ignite again, hold on to it. Use it to educate. Use it to unite. Use it to raise your voice, not just in anger, but in wisdom and truth. Because the world is watching now, and what they need to see is not only the pain we carry, but the light we shine through it. And to our non-humble brothers and sisters who are beginning to question, to explore, to search deeper, welcome, ask, learn, open your heart. You're not here by accident. You were meant to witness this. You were meant to feel something stir inside you. Thank you for watching, for listening, for reflecting. This isn't just another story. This is your moment to stand with truth, to stand with justice, and to discover the beauty of Islam beyond the headlines. May Allah guide us all, and may the truth continue to rise no matter how deep they try to bury it. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.